Talking about this. I was like,
dude.
Here, no, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm here.
I can control these through
This is definitely
Hey Austin, you know I already thread the stream, right?
Yep.
Okay.
She could have not. She had you put your nose back in and don't. And you sit there.
I'll make some mistakes.
It's just don't think. Doctor, I don't know.
I'll just do it. You don't just watch something. You like doing.
This is a class.
Carry it around, it goes up there.
Well, like, I can do introduction if people can late. And then like, Alright, are you guys interested there?
I really like that.
Yeah, let's do that.
I also remember.
Now it's fair.
Dude, when you do that, it doesn't work.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bitcoin Fargo's Introduction to Bitcoin. We have a bunch of speakers lined up for you tonight. We have local speakers, Adam Hasbargen, Eric Harvey, and Eric Olson, as well as Andreas Antonopolous, who will be providing the general overview of Bitcoin. So, on that note, I will hand it over to Andreas Antonopolous, author of O'Reilly's Mastering Bitcoin.
Audio, and we have no audio.
Yep, hold on a second. All right, you're good.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah, I can hear you now.
All right. Yeah. Hey, you can hear me. So not all of you are hiding over at the edges of the room. I can see a few of you there, and the ones who are brave enough to sit in the middle. Hello, everyone. Happy Bitcoin Pizza Day. So how many people in the audience have Bitcoin at this time? How many people have enough Bitcoin to buy a pizza? What if it cost $2.4 million? So for those of you who don't know, today is Bitcoin Pizza Day. On this day in 2010, a Bitcoin user called Laszlo Hajnik, who was one of the first people to apply graphical processing units, or GPUs, to the mining of Bitcoin, had several thousand Bitcoin lying around, but nothing to do with them. At the time, you couldn't buy anything. There were no commercial transactions, no merchant processing, no stores where you could spend the Bitcoin, only other Bitcoiners. And nobody really knew how much a Bitcoin was worth because there were no open markets where you could. If you wanted Bitcoin, you had to either mine it yourself, most likely. You could potentially buy it from someone else, but there was no established price. So in 2010, Laszlo Hajnik decided he wanted to find out how much all of this Bitcoin he'd been mining was worth, and challenged the Bitcoin community to find someone who would use a credit card to buy Laszlo 2 pizzas in return for Bitcoin. And someone in England called a pizzeria in the United States, paid with a credit card, and sent Laszlo 2 pizzas, for which Laszlo paid 10,000 Bitcoin.
Oh.
And that was in 2010. That was the first known commercial transaction with Bitcoin, establishing the price as 10,000 Bitcoin for 2 pizzas, or 5,000 Bitcoin per pizza, thousands of a penny. And so, how much is a Bitcoin? The question that a lot of people who are new to Bitcoin, well, how do you define how much a Bitcoin is worth? And the simple answer is whatever someone is willing to pay for it. And in 2010, that was 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin. And today, for 1 Bitcoin, you can buy one of those 6-foot wide pizzas that they sell in some stores, where you could feed 20 people or 10 programmers. So this is a historic day because this is the first time that the value of Bitcoin is first established, and we've come a long way. A lot of people who are critical of Bitcoin will point out that in the last year and a half, the Bitcoin price has declined by 75%, which is not the greatest drop in price that Bitcoin has ever experienced. In fact, the greatest price drop Bitcoin has ever experienced was the drop from $30 to $1, which for many people, that was the end of Bitcoin, and they decided at that point to cash out all of the Bitcoin they had bought because that drop signified the end. Since then, Bitcoin has died almost 500 times. You can see a list of all of the obituaries written for Bitcoin called bitcoinobituaries.com. Every couple of weeks, a very smart journalist will look at the latest price of Bitcoin and decide that this time it's it. Bitcoin is now well and truly dead. Of course, the perspective that really is relative. It depends. If you look over the 5 years preceding, you will notice that Bitcoin has been the best performing asset. So it really depends on what time perspective you're taking. I take a very long time view because I think that the possibilities that are created by a supranational, transnational, global, borderless, super liquid currency that's based on a completely open payment network without gatekeepers, without banks, without governments, that can be operated on a simple feature phone from anywhere in the world and send money near instantaneously anywhere in the world for very low or no cost. I have a feeling that kind of technology is useful. When I talked about Bitcoin in the past, I often had people dismiss it almost immediately, laughing at Bitcoin as a Ponzi scheme, as a scam, as fake internet money, magic internet money, internet beans, and various other things like that. And what we've seen over the last 2 years, while the price has declined, is the technology has advanced, and it's advanced by leaps and bounds. Today's Bitcoin is very different from the Bitcoin first launched in 2009. In fact, it's very different from the Bitcoin we had in 2013. Over the last year alone, we have seen a tremendous development in several key technologies in Bitcoin, including the ability to have personalized, massive wallets that have millions of addresses with a simple phrase that's about this technology is known as hierarchical deterministic wallets, or HD wallets. We've seen developments and smart contracts to be implemented in Bitcoin. We're beginning to see the implementation of payment channels for micropayments. And just recently, a couple of services have launched using those, one for tipping, and a new service that launched a few days ago called Streamium, which allows you to stream movies and play and pay by the second in micropayments. See the rate of innovation in Bitcoin accelerate as companies around the world now have the thousands of startups that have thousands of jobs and received almost $1 billion in investment in the last 18 months or so in order to develop new technologies with Bitcoin. So the reaction to Bitcoin was and that. Then the reaction of many serious conservative bankers moving from Bitcoin to looking at it as a threat. And in the last months, we've seen many mainstream financial services and institutions start dipping a toe in technology space and beginning to invest in many companies in this space. More importantly, and an even bigger compliment to Bitcoin, attempt to copy, create their own alternative page. It wasn't unusual for a company or a large content provider to look at the early internet and say, that looks kind of cool. How about we build something almost exactly like it, open content, something a bit more controlled and curated. It was walled gardens like CompuServe and AOL. And pretty soon, those types of creations failed to keep up with the open, permissionless innovation and content creation. We're going to see the same thing happen with Bitcoin. Already, many of the big institutions in finance are trying to split hairs. The idea that Bitcoin is irrelevant is no longer a credible answer because it has failed to die. And so now a new story is needed. The new story is really simple. The blockchain technology is really exciting, but Bitcoin itself is a silly currency. And when you hear that story, pay attention to it, because what it tells you is that the person saying that doesn't really understand how Bitcoin works. The blockchain technology without Bitcoin is like looking at the early automobile and saying, you know, those rubber tires are sure a great idea, but since we have all of these stables, can we make one of these vehicles that uses horses instead? Because all of this internal combustion engine stuff seems really and weird. And, you know, essentially the same thing is happening now. Large companies that are looking at Bitcoin are missing the point. They can't see that the greatest advantage and characteristic of Bitcoin is the open, decentralized nature. It's the reason you have this enormous amount of innovation going on. It's the reason why anyone can create a startup and build new services, new protocols, new applications without asking for permission. It's the reason why this is the most exciting technology to happen in finance in the last 50 years. Not because it's some gimmicky database technology that can be decentralized, but because This is a system without gatekeepers, a system without central controllers. And a system like that means that anyone can innovate without permission. In order to have a system like that, the blockchain is not enough. A blockchain technology without Bitcoin is just a boring database. What the blockchain really thrives on is the decentralized consensus algorithm, and that algorithm depends on a reward currency that aligns the incentives of miners with the security of the network. When you hear people saying it's not about Bitcoin, it's really about the blockchain, they don't really understand Bitcoin or the blockchain, because what's really magic about Bitcoin is not, and it's not the blockchain data structure, it's the decentralized algorithm that makes both of those things work together. So, you know, we've come a long way in the last 5 years from the $2.4 million pizzas to a massive increase in price, and since last year, a massive decrease in price. I can promise you that Bitcoin's price will go through many more cycles of boom and bust. We're not over. 2015 is probably the lowest volatility we've seen in this currency, but that's not going to last. We're going to see big upwards jumps and big downward plunges again and again, and a technology that is going to take years to both mature to a level where the liquidity of Bitcoin can support a nice, stable, smooth sailing global currency. Just to give you one idea of what Bitcoin is, the entire Bitcoin economy weighs in at just over $3 billion today. Last week, in comparison to the profits they made, 5.4 billion was a slap on the wrist. But it's interesting to see that the fine for malfeasance among banks can be greater than the entire Bitcoin economy. Bitcoin is still absolutely tiny. On that occasion, yesterday, I was involved, 2 days ago, I was involved in a TV interview, and I was asked the typical leading questions that most journalists like to ask. And the first question was, do you think that the New York Stock Exchange introducing a new Bitcoin index will finally bring legitimacy to this currency? And my answer was, a currency based on mathematics and transparency will in fact bring legitimacy to the 6 big banks that just got charged $5.4 billion for massive crimes. For some reason, that comment wasn't aired. And so, unfortunately, it didn't play nicely into the narrative that Bitcoin needs legitimacy. The Bitcoin needs approval. The Bitcoin will work by being part of the global. That if Bitcoin is embraced by the banks and has investment by serious, sophisticated investors, large corporations implement Bitcoin, only then will Bitcoin be a successful currency. And you probably know what my attitude to that is. It's bullshit. Bitcoin doesn't need permission. Bitcoin doesn't need massive corporations. Bitcoin doesn't need government. And Bitcoin won't get better or succeed because Wall Street permits Bitcoin to succeed or embraces Bitcoin. Bitcoin will succeed because Bitcoin is a useful technology in a world where more than 4 billion people, and up to 6 billion people if you count the underbanked, have very limited access to international finance. Where banking in the way we know it is the privilege of the few in Western developed countries. Where international trade is built on top of a fragile and slow system designed to fight wars of geopolitics and currencies rather than to enable commerce. Where vast chunks of the world have never had a credit card, and if we're successful with Bitcoin, we'll never need a credit card. Bitcoin will not succeed because we will bank the rest of the world. Bitcoin will succeed because hopefully one day with Bitcoin, we can all be unbanked. Thank you. So with that, I'd like to answer any questions you have in the audience. I don't know how much time we have, Alex, but feel free to take as many questions as you want to from the audience. If you have any questions, now's your time.
I have a question. Okay.
It can be about pizza too.
So there's been a lot of talk about like this bit license coming out.
Okay, someone needs to get closer to a microphone because I won't be able to hear your question, or maybe somebody needs to repeat it.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. There's been a lot of talk about the bit license coming out of New York. What are your thoughts on that?
So the bit license is as predicted. It's an attempt by regulators who are steeped in the old system to try to write regulations for Bitcoin. And from a practical perspective, this is a terrible idea for New York, because what it's doing is it's allowing the industries that are trying desperately to avoid, it's allowing them to write the regulations. Imagine what the internet would look like if it was the phone companies that wrote regulations about the internet. Right now, in order to conduct this Skype conversation, I would have to have attached to the side of my laptop a device for taking quarters, so I could keep feeding quarters for every minute of Skyping I do. That's how a phone company would design the internet. Make sure I keep paying by the minute. If the railroads got to design the rules for automobiles, or in fact, instead of imagining, look at the Red Flag Acts of 1896 and 1902 that were passed in England, where they required every automobile train to have an engineer, a mechanic, and an operator, and to have a person carrying a red flag running ahead of the automobile train to warn pedestrians of the machine. This is how railroads wrote the regulations for cars in early England, destroying the local automotive industry. And so with every industry, if you allow the incumbents to write the rules, what they will write is their own protection. They will write rules that can only be implemented by systems that play on their playing field. Bit licenses rules written by the banks to play on the bank's level playing field, which isn't level. And Bitcoin, most Bitcoin companies, and Bitcoin, the protocol itself, and the decentralized nature of Bitcoin, mean that Bitcoin can't do what the bit license requires. It can't do that without giving up everything that it is. And that's not a bug, that's a feature. Bitcoin can't do authentication of every Bitcoin address and tying that to a human identity. It's not designed to do it, it can't do it, and it never will do it. Bitcoin can't do anti-money laundering regulations. So these bit licenses, what they will do is essentially they will force any company doing business in New York or with New York customers to either turn Bitcoin into as much of a credit card system as they can, or stop serving New York customers. But here's the really interesting thing about bit license. Bitcoin companies can move wherever they want. Bitcoin innovation can move anywhere in the world. But you know what can't easily move from New York? New York banks. And right now that means that they're going to have to do Bitcoin under bit license, and that means that in the end the bit license ties up the hands of banks and prevents them from doing any of the really interesting and innovative things on Bitcoin. In the end, the bit license damages the ability of the banks to compete on Bitcoin's playing field. And I think in the end that will be a disadvantage for New York banks and for New York itself. But it will slow down Bitcoin. In fact, what we're going to see is more innovation around anonymity and privacy protections in Bitcoin, specifically because of the bit license.
Thank you.
I've got a question.
Should I walk up to the mic?
I can relay it.
Well, it's kind of a long question, so
All right.
maybe I should. I have a question regarding Bitcoin, rather the blockchain as a ledger system for transferring title to assets. And are you familiar with any good ways that have been developed for doing that? And do you have any opinion on the counterparty platform, if you've heard?
A lot more than just the transmission of currency. And you can either implement a Bitcoin-like system and an alternative blockchain, or you can implement protocols layered on top of Bitcoin. So just like the World Wide Web is a protocol layer on top of the internet, we see things like Counterparty and Omni and Colored Coins and other platforms like that, which enable the registration of smart assets that are attached to specific Bitcoin values and allow you to transfer these assets. With these smart assets, you can associate any kind of real-world asset or title, registration, ownership, from a bicycle to a piece of property, a land, an apartment, a car, an airplane, a boat, whatever. Any type of physical property can be associated with a title document, a digital asset, that can then be traded as proof of ownership of that underlying asset. And interestingly enough, there is already well-established law about the use of digital signatures to authenticate contracts. So you don't even need massive new laws to do this. What you need is infrastructure and broad availability of the tools. I think the use of the blockchain to trade assets is going to take a lot longer. Just like when you start seeing things like the World Wide Web developing on the internet, it took a while before most people had access to the internet, which they mostly got for email, until most people had permanent connections to the internet rather than intermittent dial-up connections, until eventually most people had mobile access to the internet. And only then did you start seeing the real potential of these overlay protocols. I think the same thing happens to Bitcoin. Bitcoin's basic application of transferring currency gets Bitcoin wallets into the hands of millions of people. And by doing so, we're creating the infrastructure for public pressure for asset registration and transference on the web. And so once that technology is in the hands of lots of people, then you can start using these kinds of applications, and there's enough density in various places to really implement them. I would guess you're going to start seeing these types of technologies being used where adoption is greatest. Maybe, San Francisco, California would be one of the places where you'd see that. And you'd see people starting to use Bitcoin registry, Bitcoin registered assets to transfer, say, the title of real estate property. Now, this will significantly reduce the costs. You can implement smart escrow with multi-signature, and that can significantly reduce your title and registration costs and escrow costs, but we're not there yet. I think this is, before you get to the layer 2 technologies, you first need the basic infrastructure to be widespread enough that you can get density of user adoption to the level where these types of applications can take off. But smart money, smart programmable money means a lot more than just buying a cup of coffee. It will impact many different types of commercial transactions and make escrow facilities and things like that very flexible. Let me take another question from the audience. Anybody else?
I wanted to ask you, because of the Bitcoin is dead articles and some of the concerns people have about possible attacks on the Bitcoin network. In your opinion, is there anything that, say, a national government could do to disrupt or to stop Bitcoin from functioning?
Yeah, one I get very often. Probably yes. There are things that that large organized institutions, whether governments or very large organizations, can do to attack Bitcoin and to disrupt it. Destroy it? No. Primarily because in a decentralized system, as long as you have somewhere to maintaining connectivity with each other and maintaining a ledger, then Bitcoin is still alive. There's no way to stamp it out. In fact, on the internet, nothing really ever goes away completely. I'm sure right now, if you were able to find a floppy disk and a floppy drive somewhere in a garage sale, I bet you on there you would still run. And you would resurrect some ancient boot sector DOS virus from the 80s. Even those things never die. So Bitcoin can lose prominence, it can lose a lot of the current users it has, but it never goes completely away because there's always people who will insist and will find it useful and will continue to use it. I think what the risk is that direct attacks against Bitcoin could delay, slow down, and disrupt Bitcoin. But also, these attacks have two other effects. The first one would be that any attack against Bitcoin forces Bitcoin to develop countermeasures. So it strengthens Bitcoin. Today, Bitcoin is not stable because no one is doing denial of service attacks against it or trying to manipulate the market. Bitcoin is stable despite the fact that everyone's trying to do denial of service attacks against it, disrupt its market. It's resilient to these, and it's developed resilience to these attacks over the last 6 years by dynamically adapting to these attacks. And so as a dynamic system, Bitcoin actually gets stronger when it's attacked because it can be modified to defend itself. And the second thing is that in many cases when governments attack something and push it underground, it gets more popular. We've seen that happen in Russia and in China. In both cases, when the government expressed concern about Bitcoin, the reaction of most people who were involved in that space increased the volume of transactions and trades. So when China suggested that Bitcoin should be shut down, Chinese transaction volume went up through the roof, almost. We saw the same thing when Bitcoin was banned in Russia, and it became 3 times bigger than it was before it was banned in Russia. In many countries, when the government says that something is bad, it means it's bad for the government and maybe Politburo, and the first people to continue to use is a decentralized system that can be rebuilt from scratch, that can be recreated many times, that's adaptive to these things, and can exist anywhere in the world. Turning off Bitcoin means really turning off the internet. And one of the ways you prevent large systems like that from being turned off is you make them absolutely essential to the economic well-being of millions of people, and then governments won't dare to turn them off. Governments won't turn off the internet today in most countries because the economic activity of millions of people depends on it, and so as a result the economic damage done by turning it off would be huge. Also, nothing starts a riot faster than making Facebook unavailable for 24 hours. So, that's another reason why governments are reluctant to shut down these things. The best way to make Bitcoin able to defend itself against this type of disruption is to make it useful to millions and millions of people. And when it's useful to millions and millions of people, then that means it has power. Let's see if we've got one more question. So far, all the questions have come from the left of the room. That's your right, my left, which means that the people over on that side, you. Everybody looks over. All right, any more questions?
All right, seeing none, I feel like we can move on to Eric Olson. Thank you for speaking, Andreas, and then we'll bring you back into the panel. Thank you very much. Better? All right. Well, thank you for that, Andreas. You can still hear me, right? All right. And thank you all for showing up for this. I'm just going to go over a couple of points on practical. I've used it myself. Previously, I got really excited about an earlier online payment system most of you are probably familiar with called PayPal. I saw that it was something that would facilitate quick, fast, and cheap transactions for people all over the world. And for a while, and recently that's turned out to be a little bit of a disappointment as time has gone on, fees have gone up. The ability to move money is somewhat limited. They've done things such as for political reasons, and it just is not quite as nice of a system as I imagined it to be. It turned out to be more of an internet age version of the credit card system with most of the same problems the credit card system had. Identity theft and fraud, and just the general problems that come with trusting a third-party intermediary. I believe that Bitcoin delivers what PayPal promised. And aside from pizzas, there are a few things today that we can use Bitcoin for. Some of the first things to become available were services like this one, Gift, which uses, it's a system of basically gift cards that you can use to buy at various businesses and easily purchase and reload with Bitcoin. And I've used this personally. I used a Home Depot card. You can usually get a good discount in some of these services. Used it to purchase windows for my house. Very easy, very simple. Kind of a workaround to be able to use coins in a lot of places that aren't quite ready to accept them yet. Another one, Pizza for Coins, if you'd like to take part in Bitcoin Pizza Day. The site has done basically the same thing for a number of common pizza chains where you can just put together your pizza, order it for Bitcoin, they generate some cards, and it shows up at your door. And this has been an interesting little space for people who are willing to put in a little bit of work and fill the gap before the bigger companies realize the potential market there. Go back one. I have some flyers here that Alex produced that are very, very nice, and they feature some of the current businesses that now accept Bitcoin. And this is really, I think, significant if you look at one of these flyers I have from
I think this is about a year old. And there's only a couple of names on this thing that most people would probably recognize, maybe Overstock, Cheap Air, Tiger Direct. And if you look at what we have to work with today, we have names like Dell, Dish Network, Expedia, Microsoft, Newegg, Namecheap, all sorts of larger companies starting to realize the potential here. We also have a list of some local businesses that accept Bitcoin. Be sure to check that out. This here is a nice way to find out about local businesses that accept coins, and I use this especially if I travel somewhere else just to see what is available, but it's also neat to see what's going on in the rest of the world. Because as usual, we're a little bit of a dead zone, especially when it comes to getting new things.
There's 6 on the coin.
6? We have a few. We have 2 of these are me. We have the Red Raven Espresso Parlor. We have Meld, and I think that's Fargo 3D printing now.
Yeah.
VidCycle, and the Stars and Stripes Bowling Alley in West Fargo. So we have a few places where you can test out and use Bitcoin locally. What I think is really interesting about this map, as Andreas was talking about some of the other countries that have less access to banks, populations with less ability to use banks to move their money around. If we go and look at, here we go. I think this is especially telling if we zoom in on Buenos Aires and look at the number of businesses we can see here that are accepting Bitcoin. In a country that has an unstable currency, recently, I think it's unstable even compared to Bitcoin. And this, I think, a lot of the early adopter potential is going to be as far as brick and mortar locations. People using it offline, where you have weak national currencies, where we do in a lot of the world, we have currencies, stop playing with that. Bitcoin gives people the potential to do transactions without having to go through a bank, without having to have an account. And in a lot of places, it's hard for people to get an account. People to transfer money internationally. Sometimes it's illegal for them to transfer money internationally. So that's just a very interesting thing to look at there. As far as actual use, I'm going to demonstrate how I use Bitcoin on one of my favorite sites here. So let's go log in. Well, I had an item ready to purchase here, but it seems to have disappeared on me. All right. There we go. I need some of these HP 61 cartridges. Excellent. Should buy them. Is that unavailable? I don't know. It's crossing over this. Now, one of the nice things about Bitcoin is that you can do transactions without attaching a lot of personal information. Of course, they have to have my address here in order to actually send me my ink cartridge. But they don't need anything extra. They can accept my payment with an assurance that they will actually get their money, because unlike the other payments they accepted, I've dealt with this some as an online retailer myself. There is a lot of issues with chargebacks, with fraud, with identity theft, and they simply don't have to deal with that when they accept Bitcoin, as opposed to a credit card or a PayPal payment. All right. So how I can do this is take many easily downloadable phone apps, set it up, deposit some of my Bitcoins into it, as I have done, and then I can just scan the generated QR code on the screen. So it's pretty much just as easy as looking at my screen, taking a little picture of it, and then clicking a button, and my order is now paid. And I can hereby the Google if I want. Which is kind of an important point, because as I said, Bitcoin can't be charged back. There's no reversing a Bitcoin transaction. Just as if I were to go into a store and give somebody cash, I can't then go home and decide, oh, I want to reverse that transaction because they physically have my cash. Bitcoin works like that, as opposed to a credit card. So there is the opportunity for other companies to step in, provide things like escrow services, or just purchase protection, whereas Google provides for Newegg, interestingly, so I can do that. All right, and I have made an order. And this is basically just as easy for a retail store to do. They could do it through a web page, through a phone or tablet, and by simply installing an app and entering in the price, or having it as part of the registered POS system. I think the main thing that's going to hold back adoption for brick and mortar stores is simply there being enough users out there to justify implementing that system. And some of the POS vendors have moved ahead on this and are integrating Bitcoin right in. I know Square is working on that, and a number of other ones. Because basically all they need to do is pass through that QR code. Most stores now have a credit card machine or some device that has a screen on it, and if they pass that information through, that's all it takes to add it to their system. We don't need to add a lot of hardware to the system. It's a cheap and easy thing to do. For a site like Newegg, there's a relatively low cost to add, and for every purchase that is made on their site, like the one I just made now, they're going to pay basically nothing in transaction fees. That is not the... Here we go. I thought that it would display a transaction number here, and I guess it's not doing that. I could use a site like this one, blockchain.info, and I could take a transaction that I have in my phone. I have a little transaction number here, and I could copy that into one of these addresses, and I'm just going to pick somebody else's transaction here, since I don't want to try to copy and paste that over. And what I have with this is a receipt. Although I can get to it, like this transaction, for instance, I have no idea who this person is or why they sent this payment. It vaguely tells me that they might be in Poland, though I've never seen it show what country I'm actually in on the map. It usually tells them I'm in France or something like that. But the point being that anyone can look at the transaction information by putting in this number. Every transaction in Bitcoin is publicly visible on this ledger and can be proven. But a third party looking in is just going to see some strings of numbers without any any correlation to a real person or necessarily to a real business. But should I want to prove that I did this transaction and that I did this transaction at the time I did it, I can. This is a receipt that essentially can't be erased, is time-stamped, and is permanently a part of Bitcoin. Now, I can make sure that my transactions are not associated with each other by using a different address each time I do a transaction. Or I could say I wanted to do something like accept donations for a charitable organization or for a political cause. I could create an address and I could publicly advertise what that address is. Anybody looking at the transaction history on that address on a site like this could see and verify how many donations I've accepted and how many I've spent. It facilitates transparency. So there's a lot you can do with this. And it also tells you how, if the network has confirmed your transaction or not. This is a new transaction, so it shows its status as unconfirmed. What that means is basically the longer it's in the network, the more confirmations it's going to rack up, and that's how secure your transaction is. When the miners on the network confirm a transaction, it's basically saying that coin is spent and can't be spent again by somebody else. So for a high dollar transaction, you might want to make sure that your transaction is true. But it's all very easy to do, and anybody with an internet connection can easily check on an address. This is BitPay. BitPay is a service that allows merchants to accept Bitcoin payments. Yeah, this is what I used myself when I had an online site selling some merchandise. And basically this allows you, I have mine pass through, so if somebody spent Bitcoins at my site, I would receive Bitcoins in my Bitcoin wallet. But there's this service and a few other services out there that will allow you basically to take a plugin for the software that most websites already run on. And add Bitcoin payments to it by pretty much just clicking install on the plugin and creating a little account here that is about as painless as setting up a PayPal or any other type of account. If we look at it here, we can see settlement. So I've decided to take 100% of my money in Bitcoin. But if I wanted to, I could have it automatically converted to dollars or whatever my local currency is and deposited daily into my bank account. So it's a very simple thing for a business to implement. This is another interesting tool that has come along. If you want to receive a portion of or all of your paycheck in Bitcoin, this company allows you to essentially use them the same way you would write down a couple of accounts. If you've ever gotten the direct deposit paperwork at your job, and you put down, I want 10% of my paycheck to go into this account and 90% to go into this other account. This is a company that allows you to, instead of using a bank account, have that exchanged for Bitcoin and then deposited in your Bitcoin wallet. So, as far as business goes, that sort of covers the local. Used it to facilitate some longer distance transactions. I had to hire a programmer for a project I did a couple of years ago. I use piece of software that I designed myself for my business that I had a really hard time finding anyone to write the program for, to update the program for. I eventually ended up hiring someone who lives in Switzerland to do this job. Now, if you've ever sent money internationally through Western Union or wire transfer, you know that it involves some paperwork, some time, and it's usually a prohibitively expensive thing to do. I paid this person probably 9 separate times over the course of the project to do various updates to my software. Each time he billed me per hour in Swiss francs. I was able to simply go online, look at the conversion to the Bitcoin price, figure out how many Bitcoins equals the number of Swiss francs I owe him, send him that many Bitcoins from my wallet to his wallet in a couple of seconds, and in total, all of the transactions cost me somewhere in the neighborhood of a cent in terms of US dollars. It's just exceptionally easy compared to any other method of transferring money internationally. I also use Bitcoin to pay my employees. And I do have 2 people who have accepted Bitcoin or prefer Bitcoin as their paychecks. And so they don't have to use a BitPay. I pay them directly out of my wallet from money that I receive from customers in Bitcoin. And it's just as easy to use for that. You can use the same transaction information like I showed on the blockchain site. If you copy your transaction, number, and I just put them into a spreadsheet with the total that I paid a person, what the exchange rate was on that day, and I have a record of everything that I've paid. And it's actually, I make a spreadsheet for the sake of showing the exchange rate for tax purposes. But the wallet I use for my business automatically keeps a ledger of everything that goes in and out of my Bitcoin account. I don't have to do anything. It just does it by itself. I'm going to move on to markets. And this, first of all, nothing I say here should be considered investment advice in any way. Everything I know about the Bitcoin market is solely based on my personal experience. And it is an extremely volatile market. No one, of course, should ever invest in anything that they're not willing to lose. But the Bitcoin price is established basically by people freely placing buy and sell orders on the market. It's a free market. And there's a wide variety of exchanges where you can do this. This is a chart that shows several of them. It shows you what the price has been over a given amount of time. The bars indicate the volume, how many coins were traded at that time. You can see the latest transactions on the side. And the price is interesting to point out here. The price of a Bitcoin is somewhat arbitrary. A Bitcoin divides into 100 million pieces. And some sites have chosen to use 1 milli-Bitcoin as the standard denomination rather than 1 whole Bitcoin. It doesn't matter. It's worth exactly the same amount as if I said a Bitcoin is worth $239, or if I say a milli-Bitcoin is worth 23.9 cents. It makes no difference at all. It's entirely in how it looks on your screen or on paper. So the value of relative to a dollar isn't necessarily that meaningful of a number. If I have $60 worth of Bitcoins, I have $60 worth of Bitcoins. To go back to the chart, this is the green line indicates orders, Bitcoins that can be sold. Orders to buy Bitcoin, the red lines indicate orders to sell Bitcoin at any given price. So to move the price, this many need to be bought up or sold, and you can see the line move as people do that. And as you can see, if I click on some different exchanges, that one's not very good because they don't give very much price data. Here we go. We can see that the lines vary quite a bit from exchange to exchange. And sometimes, if there's a lot of orders on, a lot of either buying or selling pressure on one exchange and not another, you'll see the price deviate somewhat. Here it's 239, and on the other side it's 240. Another thing to note here are the exchanges and the percentage of volume. If you look at Bitcoin exchanges, if you follow some of the talk on forums, you'll hear people talk about China a lot, and China representing such a large piece of Bitcoin's volume. These top 3 exchanges are the Chinese exchanges, and as you can see by the market share, 45, 16, 10, it looks like they account for the vast majority of Bitcoin trading in the whole world. The thing to mind about this is that the Bitcoin exchanges in China, assuming that all of their figures are correctly stated in the first place, is that they don't charge trading fees. So these numbers can be very misleading. The volume numbers don't necessarily indicate how many people are buying and selling, or how much buying and selling pressure there really is. New York Stock Exchange's Bitcoin Index, and there's a number of sites like this available that can track the price. I believe if you type it into Google, you can actually just track the price there. If you want to get kind of a composite value rather than looking at an individual exchange. It is there are Bitcoin-based, what the right word is for it, GBTC, what do they call those? Bitcoin funds that you can buy a share of on the stock exchange.
ETF or derivative?
ETF, I believe, is this one's an ETF. So you can see that, and that allows people to, for the first time, I believe, put these things into a retirement account. What you'll notice, though, is that it's selling for a considerably higher price than the regular market. But pretty soon these will be reasonably available, I think, to put in retirement account and to trade on normal exchanges. This is another exchange. This is the Coinbase exchange. And this is where I would go if I wanted to buy or sell Bitcoins. There's a number of other ones, and there's no particular reason I chose to show this one other than the fact that you can see how you buy and sell it right on the screen without me having to log in. So you get to see the chart again, and you can wire money or send money into the company and put how many Bitcoins you want to buy, at what price, places an order in the book, adds it to your wallet when the order is filled. They also have a service that will allow you to just straight up buy Bitcoins at the price they are selling them at, rather than going on the market and trying to trade in real time. So that's one of the easier ways to actually go about acquiring Bitcoins. I want to show a relative picture here of the Bitcoin spin-offs. One of the most common things I hear as well, Bitcoin sounds good, but maybe it's the currencies that are mostly just spin-offs of Bitcoin with a few feature tweaks. A slightly different algorithm, a slightly different inflation rate. And the one thing you're going to notice immediately is that the market cap and the volume for these other currencies is very, very small compared to Bitcoin. Other than for a currency such as Namecoin, which allows you to use your coins to obtain domain names without going through the normal DNS system. So there are some really unique features in these. A lot of them are things that can be done on Bitcoin that could be added to Bitcoin if they were to prove themselves as really useful technologies. But this is one of the great things about Bitcoin, I think, is that it is an open source program that anybody can copy, can modify, can play with, can test various ideas, uses of the technology, without doing it to Bitcoin itself, to find out what works and what can be useful for people. You also notice a considerable number of assets, things that are, some of these represent things like digital US dollars or gold or other shares in some kind of an online venture that can be traded using Bitcoin technology, using one of the Bitcoin blockchain, Bitcoin or Bitcoin-like blockchains. And this is an exchange where you can trade a lot of those. And the warning about these is that most of these smaller exchanges that deal with a lot of these spin-off coins are things that tend to come and go and have some reliability issues. These aren't the type of thing that I would recommend anybody put any substantial amount of money into. Bitcoin allows you some interesting security options in that you don't have to trust a third party. You can have a Bitcoin wallet like I do on my phone, and I can back this up. I can password protect it, I can hold it myself. But as soon as I take my Bitcoins and I deposit them, I give them to somebody else to hold, that's where they're vulnerable. And when you hear things, news articles that say things like Bitcoin hacked, Bitcoin stolen, they're not saying that Bitcoin itself has been broken into. What they're saying is that money that people have deposited at a company has been stolen from that company or by that company. Bitcoin is essentially cash, and if you hand somebody cash and they walk away with it, that's not a flaw of Bitcoin, that's a flaw of your trust in the person you gave your money to. But it is something to be aware of. As Bitcoin develops, there are larger companies that are maybe a little bit more trustworthy. Some even have some forms of insurance on deposits. But the nice thing is that you can always take and create your own personal wallet and store and secure your Bitcoins yourself without having to trust that third party. Last thing I want to touch on quickly here is tax issues. Again, I'm not by any means an expert on this, but I did run into a couple of issues when investing in Bitcoin myself because the price moved dramatically. There are a few things that people aren't commonly aware of. This is a site I used here where you can export from your Bitcoin exchanges, and it will figure out what your capital gains tax should be and generate the appropriate paperwork. Aside from reporting that, there are regulations as to how much money you have and substantial fines related to that. $80 in the matter of a couple of months, and then back down again. You could easily and unintentionally have a very large value of money, even if it's only for a short period of time. And a lot of these exchanges are in foreign countries, so that is something to be aware of. I think I'm actually over my time. So.
Alrighty. Well, now we can have Adam and Eric come up and present their Apertus software.
go. All right, I'm Adam, this is Eric. We're here to present the Apertus software, and I'm pretty excited about it. First off, a great presentation by Eric Olson. That was extremely practical. We need to get those nuts and bolts. We need to know that, so again, round of applause for that. And thanks for all the help from the tech people, all the Bitcoin people, Alex, Austin, Surya, and thanks a lot, you guys. I really appreciate the work you guys have been doing, so thank you. And having Andreas here is really a special honor. I mean, I was really excited that he came here and doing this. I hope he can somehow still hear us. Is he still on? Do we know if that's working? But hopefully he's watching the stream or watching later. And if you guys don't know, he literally wrote the book on Bitcoin. This is his book right here. You have it right there. It's a really good book. I've gone through it quite a bit. I've read it cover to cover, word for word. Not that I understood everything, but I do recommend you pick it up. If you don't understand something, just read through it, turn the page, go on to the next page. Try it again. But give more props to Andreas. Many don't know. I follow his Twitter feed pretty religiously now the last 2 years. He's gone to bat for Bitcoin a lot. And if I was to pick one person that demonstrates the ethos of Bitcoin, what it stands for, it's Andreas. So big round of applause for Andreas. That was extraordinarily, like, I wanted to just get up and just start going, yeah. So that was really, really exciting. So, what brought me here? I'm a researcher and philosopher by degree and training. It's been clear in my studies, and as everyone knows, that to the victor go the spoils of war. This includes writing the books, the history, and the narrative of their time. It goes beyond censorship in the moment. History has literally been rewritten in many cases. Like you see, Columbus discovers America. That was the thoughts. But really, this is more accurate. 1492, year Native Americans discovered Columbus lost at sea. So I think that's it's sort of been fought over. Once I understood that Bitcoin wasn't just a neat place to buy drugs, look that up. 100% organic. Look at the size of that bud. It's huge. But that was the first time I heard about Bitcoin, that you get weed, so I bookmarked this page many years ago. It's like, oh, just in case I need some weed, you know. But I didn't understand what I was looking at. I didn't know what it was. And what I came to realize was, I thought it was a Liberty Reserve type of program. I thought Bitcoin was this. I thought there was a centralized server, and so I disregarded it. I just didn't get it. I realized that, but once I realized it's actually more like this. I realized that by all practical purposes, if properly constructed and supported, the Bitcoin network was extremely strong. The ledger that it possessed, called the blockchain, was immutable, uneditable. Thus, it was perfect for archiving. It was perfect to make sure the powers that be aren't the only ones that can write the books, that can write the history. On each one of these, we can write our story on there. Thus, it was perfect for the people to put their story, not just the story of the victors. And now, on each one of these nodes, and this is kind of, I would say, a pretty good representation. But all these other nodes, they can actually connect as well. So one of these nodes of the Bitcoin network, an actual, let's say, just pick any of those nodes, possesses the entire history of all the transactions ever made. That blockchain.info page that Eric pulled up, that can go all the way back through time. Or if you have a Bitcoin blockchain running on your computer, which is running on his, I have one on mine, it's not running right now. It's all the transactions through time. You can destroy the bulk of that network, and if it was still to function, because they each have equal power to receive. It's like, if you took out 90% of that, any one of those could then receive the network. And that ledger that's on each one of those, again, that's called the blockchain. And here's a snapshot of 3 blocks in the blockchain, the ledger. It's taken from Andreas' book. Again, Mastering Bitcoin, available at all major booksellers and Amazon. Thank you, Andreas, so much. And so what are we looking at here? What you have then, you have one block. And in that one block, you have 10 minutes of transactions. It's time-stamped. You can see the timestamp on the previous block. Timestamp's right there. That's really huge. It's timestamps and possesses metadata that's beyond the scope of this presentation. What's important right now is the timestamp, the transactions, and why it's called the blockchain. And all your transactions are there. And I get to see my amazing art. There we go. Okay, so what makes it, that was about to block. What makes it a blockchain? Well, what they do is they take the previous block header hash, which is right there, and it ties to it up to there, into the next one. And so if you try to change even one microtransaction here, the hash will change. And all that hash is just like if you could represent me as a fingerprint. But if you change the fingerprint a little bit, that's no longer who I was. It could be somebody else. So if you try to change that fingerprint on this one by changing transaction, all of a sudden it doesn't work. The chain would then be broken. The system would reject it automatically. That's one of the key elements that gives the Bitcoin system its power. That's then the blockchain. You guys all heard the word the blockchain. That's it. Again, this is Andreas' book. Really recommend it. So, knowing that there was this blockchain out there that was really powerful, I turned to my best friend Eric. Happens to be stupid good at technology, amazing at conceptualizing and implementing ideas. Eric's also a free speech advocate, interested in finding ways to have stable historical records. He's also an artist. Blockchain tech has tremendous potential for people to create. He was able to discover a technique that's outlined actually in Andreas' book, Mastering Bitcoin by Andreas Antonopolous. So, and this is actually out of his book. This is page 131. Bitcoin's distributed in time-stamped ledger, the blockchain, has potential uses far beyond payments. The use of Bitcoin's blockchain to store data unrelated to Bitcoin payments is a controversial subject. It involves using a destination Bitcoin address as a free-form 20-byte field. And this is a process we've actually dubbed etching. Etching? We're calling it etching. And Andreas, in this book, does just a wonderful job of giving sort of the pros and cons of this. Andreas outlines the following issues related to the technique quite well. Blockchain bloat. This data goes into every full wallet holder, into their disk space, like onto his computer, onto my computer when we're running the blockchain. And also UTXO bloat. This kind of goes beyond the scope of this presentation, but unspent transactions go into the RAM. And so that's how all this data over time, the network always knows it's there. It's always there. But then there was a developer compromise, it's called the op return field, that is then disregarded by the UTXO. But again, if you want to get to know more of that, in the beginning that was a page I would skip in the book. But now I get it, I understand what this is. And so because of some of these issues with the Bitcoin blockchain possessing some of this data, and us wanting to have something else, we're putting out a call to developers to create blockchains to usher in what we call the Internet 2.0, and you'll get that a little bit more when you see Eric's presentation. Options available now for raw data besides etching. On the Bitcoin blockchain, you can do an op return, but it's only 40 bytes per transaction. It's very small. A Florin coin offers 528 bytes. They're getting the potential of some of what can be done. And Namecoin was already mentioned, and what it does is it gives you a DNS entry, it gives you an internet site entry for, I think it's over, was it a year or two? I don't remember how long it is. Anyway, but that's why I put X. Namecoin data can delete after X amount of blocks. So there's a way, if you don't want to put something in there that's immutable, like you were saying, it's programmable money. You can program a blockchain to do different things. So we want to see more coins for data. We're excited for that. Yes, we're aware of Datacoin and others, but they seem to be dying. And pros of blockchain data, Andreas says it very well. Others view it as a demonstration of the powerful capabilities of blockchain technology and want to encourage such experimentation. So they see the ability here. They see what's going on. There's definitely some stuff. So after careful consideration and what could be both a powerful demonstration and have an eye to historical record, we settled on this for one of our first etchings on the Bitcoin blockchain. Very serious moment. Oh man. Is that us?
Yeah, that's us.
Yeah, we just put ourselves on there.
Yeah.
Let's see you guys resist putting your picture on the blockchain. And you can see up here, this is where the transaction ID is on there, and you can see that it's kind of blurry. It's because putting information on the blockchain, the technique we use is a little spendy, but it can be done. How much is this number? $5?
Just $5.
About $5. And you see it's kind of blurred out. So etching is cost prohibitive. The network knows it's there. So this isn't going to break Bitcoin. That's one of our headlines. But it is something that is that does weigh on it. But hopefully Moore's law will take care of that. We also felt this next one was even more important. Dear aliens, please respond. Monitoring now. So, aliens who communicate through the blockchain, right? I'm pretty sure. So, that's what I would do. If I was an alien, I wouldn't be talking to governments. I'd be talking to the people. I'd be talking to the largest network on the planet that's decentralized. So, have we got a response yet?
Yeah, still monitoring.
Still monitoring. We are actually monitoring. We monitor all the stuff. We have a blockchain computer that we run that's monitoring many different chains right now. But seriously, here's a great usage of the blockchain in our opinion. Tribute to Nelson Mandela. There is nothing like returning to a place that remains unchanged to find the ways in which you yourself have altered. Rest in peace, buddy. Eric put this on there. And as you can see, this one, it's a much better resolution because we put in more.
Spend more money, better resolution.
Yeah. And that one is located at this transaction ID. And if you're interested more in data on the blockchain, Ken Sharif has an amazing blog, and he found our data on there. This guy is an absolute genius. So in February 2014, he had this on his blog. I really recommend you can just go Ken blockchain data, and it'll come up. There is some stuff on there that is quite fascinating. So what Andreas was talking about before was making it more useful for more people. And that's actually a conversation Eric had in the very beginning. Eric and I talked about making the blockchain more useful for people, thus giving more value to the blockchain, and that would give it greater chance to survive over time, have a historical power. We felt the best possible avenue was giving people the power to publish their work, history, or ideas, or at least a hash of it, at as low a cost as possible, that lasts as long as possible. So we created Hugpuddle. Hugpuddle is a nonprofit. Its mission is to create, implement, and protect sustainable archiving methods. And that led to Apertus, an open source software. The goal of Apertus is to create a badass, multi-purpose blockchain reader-writer. And we feel, probably today, one of the best use cases of our initial goal of Apertus to give people the power to write their story. Came after we reached out to some developers. We reached out to Paul Harris, the creator of Mazacoin, the cryptocurrency of Pine Ridge, and he put this on the Mazacoin block treaty, as you can start the blockchain. And as you can see, it's the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty, and that is absolutely powerful. And that's how you do the transaction ID on Mazacoin.
What is the treaty?
The treaty is just the end of hostilities, and then what the people get necessarily for it. So it definitely is. It's sort of his way of saying respect the treaties, and I think that is an amazing use case of it. So, free Ross and free Leonard Peltier, all that stuff. I'm gonna pass it over to you.
Okay. We'll see if we can figure out how to get this thing to work. My screen here went black. Oh, it's high tech. There we go. Okay. What's that fancy one?
Yeah.
So what you're seeing on the screen is I have two different windows open. You're seeing the main Apertus, which Apertus really now has become just a web browser. It's 100% web-based. It is really just nothing but a web browser, I would say, a bit fast. So what you're seeing here is the not quite released yet. This is the 0.3.0 beta, but it's still, so it might have some bugs in it. Wording it. So let's start. I don't think I need that. So I'm going to leave the one on the right over there for a while, because what I'm going to do with them in a little bit is I'm going to show how you can use the blockchain today as instant messaging, Twitter-like kind of application where you can communicate directly with people over it and create and follow friends and all. Basically, we're trying to put a lot of the big companies, well, I guess we're not trying to put them out of business, but technology like this, I think, is going to really decentralize and be disruptive. Make it bigger. Then, Apertus is really a browser, but along with it, there's tools. So let's kind of dig into them first. You can hold them up here on the right and the bottom. So what I'm doing now is I'm just kind of resizing my screen to make this work better for me. So it's currently, it consists of the main, what do you think this?
Top button, very top button.
So this screen here is the main browser screen. Over here we've got, you can kind of consider this your file explorer. Like as you store data, it's going to show up in here. This screen here is basically where you, as we add more functionality and more features, more little knobs and things that you can turn off and turn on, they're going to start popping up in here. This area here is where you classify different types of data that you're going to be storing. This section here is where you're going to be doing your main entry of data. And currently, just to give you some information about Apertus itself, Apertus is Latin for open, and that's kind of what we tried to, that's what we're trying to, it is basically the word that kind of drives me as I'm creating this, to try to keep it as open as possible. So we originally, when we first made the first data layer, it was really controlled. We had a lot of different kinds of metadata into it, but we ripped that out, and the data layer that we have right now is very basic and open and raw. There's really no formatting in it, and because of that, we get noise off of the network, because some transactions, just by the way that they're formatted, Apertus still kind of thinks that it's data, so it's basically noise that gets, which I'll show you later. Okay, jump into it. Some of the things that Adam showed you on the screen, I've put into my favorites section here, and favorites are just basically like you have on a browser. As data's coming in and you want to save it for later, you can store it into your favorites. And let me just click on some. So the one that Adam showed earlier, Bitcoin, Hug Puddle, We Are Star Stuff. So I clicked that link. It went to my local blockchain and actually regenerated this image based off of some transactions. And if you click on address.dat here, you can actually see the transactions or the addresses that it used to make the text in that photo. You'll notice there's a lot of repetitive information here. What you're seeing is inside that image, inside image files, there's big space, there's lots of repetitive data. So when it's converted into addresses, it becomes the same address over and over again. One of the biggest problems that we had and other people are having is that when you create a transaction, you can't send the same address together on the same transaction. So you have to basically, any file that you want to put in there, you have to split it up. Anytime you see multiple data, this has to stop being created, and then you have a unique transaction just for this one, and then you start over again with a transaction here. So that was like a big hurdle for us to try to figure out how can we get data with repetitive data, files with repetitive data shoved into the blockchain. Sorry. One of the more fun things that we put on there, and just I think this also shows you the power of what Apertus is doing today is, especially if you're a web programmer, anything that can run on the web today can run on the blockchain. This here will be an example of a jQuery-based program that I created, I think, like over a night, hanging out with my wife, eating pizza. I created Bong. And so what Bong is basically Pong, but it's Pong that you can play on the blockchain. And since we put it on the blockchain, it's Pong that will be there forever. So anyone can come in here. Let's start it going. However, let me make it play itself. Pong was a simple game that I could program in just, a night. But any program that can run on the web today, any Java-based program, can now be put onto the blockchain and can be run directly through Apertus. And it can also interact with your computer directly as well. So I talked about needing another layer, of technology in order for things to advance. Apertus really has become that and is getting closer to that every day. It's Bong Ball, so you can do weird things to it, it's Bong Ball. Okay. So if you want to play Bong Ball, you basically just, if you already got a blockchain, download Apertus and you can play Bong Ball. Unfortunately, Bong Ball was archived before we had figured out how to create keywords and ways to index and find things later. So Bong Ball is kind of lost right now in the blockchain unless you know the transaction ID right here. With the upcoming release of Apertus, we figured out ways to take transaction IDs that were at one point lost and kind of reclaim them and categorize them so you can find them easier. What we came up with is, you don't want to always reinvent the wheel. So if you look at some of the technologies that are there today, for instance, Twitter. And now with Apertus, you can basically put hashtags on your archives, and those hashtags will let anyone type in the same hashtag and find anything that anybody has archived with that hashtag. So it lets you find things just by typing in something that you could remember, like for instance my name maybe. It's telling me that I don't know how to use my own software, and it says you got a big blockchain. Okay. Right now, Bitcoin is the only blockchain that supports keyword lookups. The reason it supports it is with 0.10.0, they implemented a new feature called import address, which lets you import addresses that you don't own and watch them. And the reason that makes this work is what a keyword is basically just, we'll take that text and then we're going to convert it into an address. And the way that we convert it into an address, whenever anybody types in that text, it always gets converted to the same address. And when we do an archive, we send a little tiny bit of money to that converted address, and that creates a permanent link to that keyword. So when I type in MB, and enter, so what it did is it took that MB, converted it into keyword, went out and searched the blockchain and found these two references to that keyword. Anyone around the world today with Apertus could put in pound EMBII to their archive, and it would just show up on this list along with everyone else's archives. So that kind of poses a problem, we don't want all this, you don't want to see a bunch of other people's junk. You don't want to see, you just want to see the stuff that you care about. And also, hey, what if someone wanted to put a virus or something on here and just, if they archived a virus, that could just immediately come to your computer. So that was early on with our first release. We we put security into Apertus. And it's actually that security that allows us to do a lot of other things with Apertus, because the security is what lets you put trust in a trustless space. So Apertus allows you to put trust back into a blockchain. And again, Apertus works with not just Bitcoin, but that whole list of when Eric was showing you all those lists of altcoins, all those different altcoins, Apertus has the ability to connect into all of them, because those altcoins, programmers, except for a few, programmers didn't come and like completely recreate that blockchain. They took code or a Litecoin, they tweaked a little bit, and then they called it their own coin. The reason that because that they did that, since they did that, they all work very similar. And similar, we were able to create this interface that talks to all of them. So Apertus, for instance, on our servers, I think Apertus is talking to how many now?
11.
Apertus is creating 11 blockchains, and they could talk to more. It's just that we spend $150 because everything that we've been getting, we've been basically repurposing. We're also environmentalists as well. So basically, you can see that our laptops, if you unplug our cords, they shut off because the batteries had a long time ago they died. Let me show you how one of these works. And I warned these people, I warned you guys I could talk for hours on this, so I'm trying to show you the key things. But here's an example of setting up a wallet. This one's for Bitcoin. So a wallet, you define a name, short name. So far, it's currently a free text field, but we're recommending people to use the standards that are out, like on the networks like BTC, LTC, Doge, MZC, because what those are going to do in the future is it's going to allow us to connect all the blockchains together, and we got to make sure that everyone's using the same 3 letters to represent BTC. Otherwise, when we try to communicate to it, if you're calling it something else, it won't work for us. So it's important that you name it correctly. Apertus is going to come preloaded with, I think, 7 different blockchains where these settings are already filled out for you. So unless I wouldn't mess with them for now, but they're pretty self-explanatory. Version byte, that is the first digit of the address. That's really the biggest difference between most blockchains is they like to find a letter that starts with their coin. For instance, Bitcoin has a P, Litecoin has L from the beginning. So that's, other than that, the addresses are the same. So when you're adding a new coin, you got to figure out what version. What are they calling it themselves? So that's what this address here is. Payload size is how the address is. And right now, most addresses are 20, the payload size is 20 bytes. We haven't seen any different ones than that, but it's customizable, so when we get newer coins out that allow us to have more data in different fields, we can increase that. Transaction size, what transaction size is it basically, it says, how many addresses do I want to send in a single transaction? And the reason that's important is the more I can put in one transaction, the cheaper it is for me, and the faster I can get the data onto the blockchain. I haven't tried into Bitcoin yet because Bitcoin's expensive, but I've been experimenting a lot now with Mazacoin because the developer said we could, and also Potcoin because it's so cheap. And so I'm going to show you some stuff on Potcoin later. But the transaction size says for my file, I want to take 20 bytes times 330 times and send it all at once and shove it in. If you increase that, you could send 10,000 at once, and basically you could send like a meg at one time. But the blockchain might not accept it because the miners have to say, well, do I want to accept something that big or not? And if they choose not to, they'll just reject it and you won't be able to archive. So we're recommending that stays around this level. Min-miner fee, that is basically, Adam had explained that this bloats blockchains. So you might want to compensate the miners because the miners are the ones that are maintaining the blockchain, the servers. The min-miner fee, if you increase that, it's like you're donating money to the miners. Unless you get the money for storing your data. Mint
Parking fee.
a parking fee. Mint transaction is different for each blockchain. That every blockchain says because of spam, they're not really preventing us from putting stuff on there. But previously, because of spam, even though you could go down to, what is it, 8 digits? 8 digits past the 0 is the amount of data that you could send, or the amount of currency you could send someone, which is 0.0000001 of a Bitcoin. But they've raised that up higher on most of them to prevent people from spamming. So a lot of them stuck around 0.548, and some of them are different, but we've pre-populated those for different coins. RPC user, RPC password is basically how you connect to your local wallet. Because your local wallets can open up a little communication channel that you have to authenticate to. That's your login, your password. You can remember that if you want. I'm going to change it after this. And helper URL is something that we added. We kind of copied Bitcoin 0.10.0, which is a feature that came out with that version. It lets you have helpers. And so I can explain what that is.
And all this stuff's in the help file too, is in the info file. You have step-by-step on how to set this up for yourself so you can do your own archiving information.
Let's go back to, oh, not that one,
And that includes types of things like asset transfer and color coins like Andreas was talking about. We're very close to having color coin enabled on Apertus.
So the helper URL allowed me to click on the address and actually go out to Bitfossil, which is our website that's real-time indexing all this stuff. As people are archiving things, Bitfossil is collecting it and it's indexing it to make it even easier. They're currently the only coin that can do the keyword lookups, but we are supplementing that with Bitfossil. We can supplement that because we can index the keywords, and on the chains that don't support keyword lookups in the future, we can still give you keyword lookups on those chains, even though they don't support it. We're really trying to get kind of, like a Google-like presence for the blockchain. What you also see here is that out on Bitfossil, since this archive was archived unsigned, everything's been kind of, you can see it, that it looks like it's just HTML, because what it did is it kind of cleansed it. It made sure that people didn't send viruses to our server. So anything that comes in, if we don't trust it, it basically gets wiped out. It gets converted into basically the HTML representation of the code, which is completely safe. So the cool thing about that is if there is code there, you can read it, and if you know how to program, you can say, oh, that's safe. And then once it's safe, you can allow it to come in unfiltered. All right. But there's some we've been putting all kinds of things on there because we've been doing this for how long now? Year and a half. I just wanted to show you some things that we put on there. Nope, not that. That's the last one. Here's one of the first things I put on there. Marilyn Monroe. My wife loves Marilyn Monroe, so we created a Marilyn Monroe tribute, stuck around there. After Pau allowed us to use Mazacoin as testing, one of the first things that we used the coin for was to do large file testing, which on a blockchain, 1 meg is a large file. So this was the first over 1 meg file that we put on there, which is actually Cheap Sitting Bull. It's a high-res image that we put onto the Mazacoin blockchain. And that particular archive took about 3 hours for it to actually archive. We now, because of the ability to increase that transaction size that I had talked about, where you can send more data at once, on the right blockchain, we could put that data on there in a second, if they'll accept it. Nelson Mandela, Adam showed you that. Another good example of what you can do is media. You can actually put media on the blockchain. This is just a MIDI file, which is the Helios epitaph, which is the world's oldest, but now it's going to live on in the blockchain. Even longer. Another thing that we put on there is a complete website, which is an actual readable book of the, I might not pronounce it right, And the reason we put it on there is because it has multiple languages, and it kind of creates almost like a Rosetta Stone. So you've got English, but then you also have the Sanskrit of it, and so and you can browse it. You can, it is a web page.
You're clicking on the blockchain. Where you're clicking is going to the blockchain.
When I'm clicking, it's going to the blockchain. It's grabbing this. It's
This is not the internet. This is a browser. Yeah.
No, I can turn my internet off, and I can completely still do all these things, which is kind of cool. My mother passed away not too long ago. I put a tribute of her on there. I thought that was a nice thing to do. You can, I now know that this will be here, long after I'm gone. I'm an artist. I'm beginning to put my photos on here. You notice this one's on Bitcoin, and I've really been putting a lot of stuff on Bitcoin simply because it's so cheap. To give you an example of how cheap it is, I want to kind of simulate something here. Going to attempt. Oops. Now I got to remember where I put that. Actually, I'm going to go to my downloads, but I'm probably going to get some sort of virus warning. Yeah, it does that every time I go in there. Here we go. The reason I'm going to the particular files is because I actually know how expensive it is. Okay, here we go. So this here is an actual movie, and if I wanted to put that on the Bitcoin block today, that would cost me 3 Bitcoins, which is like $750 or something like that. If I wanted to archive it to,
So you can put it on the Bitcoin network, and then save the transaction ID and point to another blockchain.
yep. So taking 320 from Bitcoin, that seems like a lot. That's actually 25 cents. So on Bitcoin, I can put that same. I can put the whole movie onto the Bitcoin blockchain, and you get. This is actually playing a video off of the Bitcoin block. And actually, a bigger video I have about how to get video controls yet should be resolved pretty soon. So this is a 4-minute video. You can more powerful things about what we're doing right now with the is code reuse. So the you saw, in order to make that, I had first archived jQuery, which is I looked at it, it is okay for me to do this as long as we put all this on here. So the jQuery includes were archived onto the blockchain, and then Bong used that code in order to make Bong. So the Bong game is actually using code that was archived previously in another time and bringing it in, and that's how you can kind of see how that you can basically just keep on building upon building different things as more and more developers start putting their code onto different blockchains. Let's see, encryption. So what's coming out with this new release is Bitcoin uses encryption. It's very heavily used in order for it to work properly and secure it. So we leverage the same encryption that Bitcoin is using to encrypt the data that you put onto the blockchain. So if you didn't want to be there publicly, and you wanted to be something that only you could access in the future, you can do that. This is an image of my grandpa took of me when I was a child, and it is actually existing on the blockchain encrypted, but the reason we can see it is because I have the key, which is here in my vault. So vault basically lets you just say, give me a new vault, name it, and then anything that archived vault will be encrypted with that vault. And now I'm the only one that can actually see it. And what's cool about it is the vault actually, it just exists in Bitcoin. Oops. It is actually this address in my wallet. So if I wanted to take all my data that I've archived to the vault and move it someplace else, I can export out this one onto a thumb drive. I can go to another, wherever I'd like to go, put it onto another one, and now I have access to all my data again without really having to move the data, because the data is distributed everywhere on the blockchain. So with the vault and encryption, you have the ability to basically move assets physically as well as digitally. Because I can archive things to a vault and export just the private key, and then I can take that anywhere I want physically and move it. So it lets you take. It's just pretty interesting. It's hard to explain this.
Essentially, he's created PGP over the blockchain. It's pretty good for protection. It's really, PGP is an amazing concept, but it's embedded also within the Bitcoin blockchain.
And again, I'm an artist, so I'm constantly putting art. I'm only showing a little bit of what's out there. I'm pretty sure, and what's really cool about this is, we're some of the first people that are doing it. So we're kind of, when people go look back in the history, because the blockchain just stays there forever, the very first things that they see are going to be the things that we've put on there, and they'll just always be around. So for me, that's very valuable, knowing that as an artist, I'm kind of in the very beginning of having my art in this form. So it's pretty exciting for me. Another artist that is working with me and doing similar things is Alan Vanderveer in Chicago. This is some things that he's put on. Interesting stuff there.
And with that PGP or with that encryption, you can take that particular piece of art, and it can be then, always a picture has like 1 of 10 or 2 of 10. Using these signatures that Eric's talking about, you could then sell a piece of artwork to somebody, and then you could digitally sign it over the blockchain, and it would be their unique take, it would be their version.
So that's kind of a brief summary of how it's working. I wanted to kind of get into the guts. How much time do we have? Do we have another speaker after this?
No.
We're done?
You got 3 minutes, wrap it up.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah.
This whole section down here, which I didn't get to talk about, is really how you're storing your data. So you can create a folder. And so, for instance, I'm putting all my stuff into MD art stuff. That feature is not working right this moment, looks like. None of that's working this moment. Well, since we only got 3 minutes, I want to show you some of the cool stuff. So on this side over here, we have another Apertus. They're identical. And on this one, we're going to say enable monitor. So what that means is, this is the same thing that we're doing on the website. So this is what it's doing is that as all data is coming in, it tells me that you can't do Bitcoin, right? Oh! I must have at some point turned off Bitcoin. That's why it's not working. Let's put Bitcoin back on. Well, we'll switch over to Bitcoin. It's more expensive, but yes, don't want to wait. So we're gonna do some communications across Bitcoin. Yep. I have to turn it back on. I turned it off. bugging it where it's not accepting those commands yet without refreshing. Okay, so now I'm monitoring Bitcoin. So if you look on a lot of those websites that you see now, you can see all the Bitcoin streaming in, you can see the different addresses. Well, that's what this is doing too. As all the different Bitcoin transactions are coming in, it's monitoring every single one and it's saying, is that data, is that data, is that data? If it's not, it throws it away. If it does, it displays it. So now that we're monitoring, bring this down. I'm going to turn filters off for now too. Tell me that's crazy dangerous. Okay. Now, assuming that I am somewhere else in the world, and we were going to show you, a test to show you how long it takes to get from here to Chicago, because our servers are in. There's one in Chicago, and we've got one that we're working on now in Texas. But the communication between one Apertus and another Apertus happens in seconds, because it's the same thing. It's the same speed that when you made that payment. That's the speed that these transactions are going to the other Apertus client.
This is just Apertus and just the blockchain. We're not using anything else.
So we're going to say, okay. Oh, yeah, it still thinks I'm going to attach that video, which I am not going to spend that much money. Delete that. And as you type, you can see it's going to tell you how much this is going to cost. Now it's telling me, okay, that's about 0.020 cents. So that's fine. That's not too expensive. And I'm going to put a keyword on here too, so I can actually make a link to it. So I popped it here, and then now in my little chat window over here, you can see it just popped in the top over there. And as we're typing, you can make this easier so you don't have to keep on hitting that save. And it's just going to pop in over there. So Apertus is basically, it's like instant messaging across. Right now that just happened to Bitcoin, but you can do that on any of the blockchains that you saw there. Some of them are a lot cheaper than others. And it's the same, you can attach, things along with it. I have a whole collection of very small icons that I've been systematically putting in one at a time, because then later I can bring them all together and reference an icon set, and then these icons we can use as, so instead of actually having to archive the icon, you can make a reference to it, like a smiley face, and then it'll show up in the chat window. But for now, I'm going to put one in I haven't done yet, which is, surprised? I'm gonna make sure I put a keyword on that one too so I can find it. Save that. And then, pop it over there. So that's basically interconnection. One more thing I got to show you, because this is one of the coolest things about Apertus, is it allows, we've talked about contract management. Apertus also has a feature that lets you find proofs. So you can basically, if you have a document and you want to prove that it existed at a certain time, you can use Apertus to insert a proof of that document. And right now I'm using an image of me and my wife as the document.
Imagine that's your asset that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to insert this. Now I came over here. Oop, you saw it just came over there as like text. What is that? But really what it did is it created a hash of that document, and then it converted that hash into addresses. And so now that I can look up that document again, basically doing that in reverse. So if I say, okay, when did this file exist? And I'm going to select the same one. Now it tells me how many times that hash, when was the first time that hash was seen on Bitcoin, on this date. And it was signed by me. I didn't even get into the signatures, which basically is the whole trust area. And then this is the one that we just did. You notice that it has a date of 1969. Here, you can see that. 12/31/1969, it's because it hasn't actually gotten onto the blockchain yet. It's still pending. Once it gets a block date, it will actually have a real date, which is these here. So Apertus picks it up before the blockchain hasn't even accepted it, and that's a feature that we might be able to use in the future, where if we just want to, we could send messages that we know will never get accepted, and then basically get them for free, and then just discard the wallet and start over again. So in the future, we can transfer things across it without even spending money, because of that instantaneous aspect of it kind of being broadcast and transmitted. But we're not quite there yet. That's kind of a rough overview of it, I guess. Adam, would you like to play some bonbon? And if anybody wants to play some bonbon, hey, it's up here for you. I'm just gonna let it run. I'll let it play itself? Okay. Make it play itself. Make it really big. Because that's what bonbon is all about.
Blockchain-based bongo.
There you go. That's Apertus. Thank you. We're looking for programmers to help us. We got a lot of work to do. So. All right. Cool. So is there anyone else after us, or you're next?
All right. So now we will have a question panel with myself, Adam, Eric Olson. Austin will be running the live stream still, and then unfortunately Andreas was unable to stay for the panel. But anyways, we'll have Surya come up and he will moderate the panel. You do whatever.
All right.
So, does anyone have any questions for our panelists?
Basically, how do you get started with Bitcoin and why would you want to use it?
Let's take that one.
So sorry.
Sure. Well, you can use it for the things I showed. Obviously, why you would want to. I guess depends on your personal use. For me, like I showed, ordering things out from Newegg, it's actually takes less time to simply use than say a credit card. Use it for things like give, my example of Home Depot, you can save potentially some money. For me, it's easy to use because I keep money in Bitcoin a little more readily than I would, in paper currency for purchases as large as, say, windows for my house. It really depends on your personal use. For a lot of people, some of these transactions are probably inconvenient to do in Bitcoin, but it really depends what you're trying to do. For instance, the programmer I paid, that was a very convenient way to do that transaction. It would have been considerably more difficult and expensive to do it any other way. And depends on if you have that sort of use for it, but I see people like standing in line at the Asian grocery store near my house spend more than $100 to send money, I forget, an African country somewhere, and it was, I think, about 40 or 50% of the total she was sending was actually the transaction fee to do that. Doing remittance, trying to get money to somebody, and you don't want to lose a large portion of that money in the process or have it take a really long time to get there. It can be a very efficient way to do things. As far as how you go about doing it, the Coinbase account I showed there, that's a really simple process where you can just go to their website, basically create an account like you do on any website, link it to a bank account. I don't know if they take money orders or other forms of payment, but the way I've used that is you essentially just go on their website, link your bank account, tell them how much Bitcoin you want to buy, and it deducts it from your bank account.
Coinbase is the best. Right now they're following the regulations. Like they have got it set up so that they are following know your customer rules and all that. So if you're looking to avoid any federal issue or state issue, Coinbase is definitely the best. Coinbase.
Coinbase is where I first got Bitcoin. However, I actually have never bought anything with Bitcoin yet. I think we bought some of the Litecoin at one point.
Well, we bought some of our systems.
But I personally, to me, Bitcoin is
Apertus
is data. It's just it's data.
That's Coinbase.com.
Coinbase.com, yeah.
Alright.
There's a couple of them, Circle and Circle.com.
Yes.
Alright, so Coinbase.com is where you want to go. Anyone else? Go for it.
Fascinated with the first stuff. And also, I probably have a couple questions. The one you mentioned, the bloat, blockchain bloat. So if more people start putting up data, images,
Like cat pictures?
cat pictures,
Yeah.
unmentionables, maybe. Like, are you, first, I guess, do you need all the blockchains for all the coins, altcoins that you're searching for and figuring and stuff?
Well, you actually don't need a local blockchain. You can connect it to a blockchain service like Blockchain Control. They expose out their wallets and they simulate an RPC, which is what Apertus uses to talk to your wallet. So you don't actually need a wallet or a blockchain on your computer
To listen, to look at the stuff on it.
you can do it.
But if you want to put something on it, you need a blockchain.
Yeah, we're recommending that you have a blockchain because we think that this is another way to get more people to have full blockchains. Right now, I've got 3 blockchains on a cheap laptop that probably should have been thrown away 3 years ago.
You have 11 on a thrift store laptop.
Yeah.
So how much space is that?
The server that I have has less than, it's only using 2 gigs of memory, and it has a 500 gig hard drive, and I think it's only using around 300 gigs of that, and I have 8 blockchains.
Right now, the Bitcoin blockchain is about 32 gig. So, and then, but the other ones get much smaller. So you can, like on one hard drive you can get from the thrift store, an old 32-bit computer. Like I said, we have 11 with only 4 gig RAM, running all very comfortably, on older computers. So knowing Moore's law, just how fast technology gets. Like even right now, you could run a lot of stuff on your smartphone, and you could do a lot of what Apertus is doing, actually. So, but in a couple of years, it'll be even better.
And one other thing that prevents the bloat is, like you said, like I showed you that video, if I wanted to put that video on Bitcoin, I would have to pay $800 to do that. So, but I can find another blockchain, like a newer blockchain or a blockchain that is kind of
Or video coin that someone's going to develop for us,
coin,
and we put the videos
and you can put it on there for a quarter, and I can put it on there instantly. But I can still, since Bitcoin is going to be around for a long time, I can create a reference to the file that I archived on another blockchain on Bitcoin, just by because Apertus is making a master index of all the different blockchains, so they all kind of exist together. Every transaction ID is universal ID that's universal for Bitcoin, but it's universal for any coin. So I can take all the IDs from the different coins and stick them in the same index and not have to worry about them colliding. And because of that, they all kind of merge together. So whether it's on Bitcoin or Litecoin or Dogecoin or whatever coin, you can make references across them.
On Apertus, it would appear seamless. Like you would now, instead of having all these different servers that are handling the internet, you can have the whole internet could be blockchain based, and then that was Andreas is talking about. You'd have no government that would be able to interfere, no company could control it because it's all peer-to-peer, and it's all decentralized. We really see this as potentially the internet 2.0 once some of this gets more simplified. Like when showing those wallet settings, eventually that can be all automated. That's why we need developers. That can be an automated service. You don't even see that happen, and it just pops right up.
Keep going.
Who's next? Should I keep going?
Sure.
Go for it.
Just thinking, so as a developer, I got familiar with JavaScript and CSS libraries being put out on CDNs so that
already on the blockchain. What we'll do is that right now it's not tagged, so it's hard. But all the stuff that we
actually deploy and make obvious like this is the blockchain.
Yep.
CDN.
So I'll just put it, you can just put a hashtag and hashtag jQuery v11 or something. And now anyone that types in jQuery v11 can see exactly what the transaction ID is. And then in your code, since it's all together, you just do .. /transaction ID. That brings you to the jQueries where it lives, and then you can reference it in your code like you would normally. And you would just always know going forward that it's there. It will never not be there. And what we're also working on is with some of the tracking IDs, we can make it so when you're following a keyword, the developer of it, and if you trust them, which I didn't get to show you there, if you trust someone and they say, hey, I just put a new version of jQuery on here at the same hashtag, then you get the new, you can upgrade if you trust.
Like Otto, and what the trust is, just really briefly, is that there is embedded in Bitcoin an encryption protocol. And Apertus just pulls that encryption protocol, and you know that all you would have to do is give me your Bitcoin address. And then Apertus would then use that to then send you information, and then you only possess the private key, so only you can then pull it. It's just like PGP, except it's using, we call it the K1 nipple. The Bitcoin, look up Bitcoin
Looks like
encryption, it looks like a nipple. So we've been calling it the Bitcoin nipple. So when we say we're doing encrypted communication, that was like, use the Bitcoin nipple.
Yeah, so so when we create a transaction, we take all of the data of the transaction and then we get the hash, and then we sign the hash using the Bitcoin wallet, and we put the signature of the hash along with the transaction. So then when that comes to the next person, they can take that and go backwards and then prove that you were the one that put that on there, because the only person that can put that on there is the person that owns that address. And if you trust that address, now you trust anything. You could say I trust everything that you would ever want to do to
Just
my
a pause here. That's then secure asset transfer. What you just said right there. That was the answer to your question. And yes, Apertus can be that system that handles that motion, just using the principles of Bitcoin itself. When Andreas is saying it's programmable money, I didn't get it until I read his book. That there you can put all these layers, just these layers on there. You just sit there and your mind is just blown. It's like, holy shit, this is it, you know.
Yeah, but we've been, so far no one's chatting with me yet because we haven't really told anybody. So it's just me talking to myself. So I'd like more people to write. It only costs, it probably costs you fractions of a cent to put something on there. But if you put it on there, it's never going to go away. So, make sure I don't have there's no spell checkers or anything on there yet. It's just open. You put some stuff in there that's spelled wrong, everyone will know for the rest of eternity that you don't know how to spell.
Are you going to check one?
What's that?
You're going to create a check one?
Right. Okay.
Well, what Apertus does is it converts every coin into a chat coin, and then you can chat between them. So we might not ever create coins, and if we do create coins, we might just they would be basically data channels, like TV channels, where you have a coin that most musicians decide that that's where they're going to archive their music.
Right.
And so now it changes the way society works. So instead of a musician making you pay for something to buy it, musician puts it out there first, and then you can donate to them because when they put it out there, along with their archive is their address, and you can send money directly.
You can tip them directly then through Apertus. We have functionality coming where you know that person put out that particular song. Let's call it Song Coin. They put their song on there, and then they put, let's say on the Bitcoin network, then they put, this is where my address is for. Then you could then tie that song on Songcoin to Bitcoin, and then you listen to the song. Well, that's pretty cool. And then because those are connected because of the encryption of these two coins, you go directly to send them that tip. You're not sending it to some other person that might say they had it, because then what he was saying is you can go back in time to see who it was that put it on there first, because you have the blockchain, and then that's the person that would get the tip for that song.
And for software companies, it's pretty cool because
sorry, music industry.
Yeah, but for software companies, you can release in your software, and you can do it in a way that all your customers know that you are the one that is your software that they're getting. So it allows you, they can start doing auto upgrades through blockchains because in their software, or through Apertus, you're trusting them. So you trust them enough to say that I will let you upgrade my program. So we'll be having an optional thing within Apertus that if you trust us as HugPuddle, then we will upgrade Apertus for you as we get new releases, but we'll be upgrading them through the blockchain. And so far we've been putting every one of our releases on Mazercoin, and we'll continue to do that. So we'll actually be upgrading you through Mazercoin. Or if you want to get free updates, you'll have to go to Mazercoin. Unless Mazercoin starts to create a service where you can do it remotely off of the internet, then you can go through them off the internet and get it that way as well.
It doesn't have to be through the etching process. It can be through the fields, like since you understand this language. It would be through the fields in the program itself. Like Bitcoin allows 40 bytes through op return. You could change that to 1,000 or 3,000, so you're not burning coins so much, that you're actually not doing the UTX, the unspent transaction output below. It would just be gone. It wouldn't matter. And then the blockchain itself, it would be getting bigger for Songcoin. It wouldn't matter because they are ready for it, because the social contract was, this is for songs. If you're going to run this blockchain, you know you're going to get some data for songs. So if you're front-loading that as a social contract, like Florin Coin, they're allowing 500 plus bits of data, and they're front-loading that, so it's a social contract saying, hey, go ahead, put data on there, that's what we want it for. So we want to see more coins like that that are seen to, and people are getting it. There's a lot of chatter about doing this.
You could have just the
not just
genres of music. You got a jazz coin, and so if you're a jazz enthusiast, you download the jazz coin blockchain, and now you've got access to this huge catalog of different songs and things that were put onto it immediately for you, and then once you have a blockchain, you could also be chatting on jazz coin, and you could be sharing and telling people what you like the most. You could be tipping the artists on jazz coin. Apertus just lets you do lots of cool things with the coins that currently exist. I think that in the future coins will just adopt what Apertus does natively, but we want to remain open, and we've been really focused on making sure that we basically only use the commands available to us through the wallets. So everything that Apertus does, it basically does through communicating with what was exposed by the Bitcoin developers themselves of what you can do to a wallet. We're just using them in different ways.
Where do we get? How do people get Apertus?
This version isn't released yet. The version that's out there right now is not. Will let you do just raw putting data in, putting data out, but it won't let you do anything with T codes. This one will be probably released within the month, but you can go to. Currently, we have a website called Get Disk Drive, because it was originally called Apertus Disk Drive when it really was just putting data in and out, and the acronym is ADD, which we kind of all suffer from. But if you go to Get Disk Drive, you can get the current version, or if you go to GitHub, you can download, you can contribute, you can download the current source code and compile it and run it. This right here will probably be. I'll shove that into GitHub later tonight, along with all the bugs that you saw.
So you know what to compile, you can get it on GitHub now, and if you want to have a better working version, it's getdistrict.com, and now we're a compiled version.
That's our last stable version, but
it still does a lot of stuff.
Anyone else?
Can Bitcoin be stolen and counterfeited?
Can Bitcoin be stolen or not?
it can definitely be stolen. I'm not sure about counterfeiting.
Well,
Counterfeiting is really, really hard because all the different nodes in the network have to agree upon whether a transaction is valid or not. So you could say, oh, I have these coins here, but if the rest of the network doesn't agree, you can't really spend it on the rest of the network. It would just get rejected.
So you'd have to control over 50% of the network to counterfeit a coin. It is possible, it's called a fork. It's happened in other blockchains that don't have the network effect that Bitcoin does. Bitcoin is worldwide with 7,000 nodes as of today. But let's say there was only 20 nodes of Potcoin. I think there only is about 20 nodes of Potcoin. And then you had 12 of those nodes that all were like, hey, let's get together and let's make a bunch more coins, you know, and that would be counterfeit. So you'd have to 51% of the network, it's called, and that's the only way to counterfeit, because the blockchain would go back. You would have to change the blockchain. You would have to defeat the purpose of it. So it's possible, but it's extraordinarily expensive. I think the number right now to break Bitcoin is over $20 million worth of hardware that you'd have to produce and then consistently produce and consistently fight. Not saying that it can't be done, but you would see it when you're looking at some of these charts. You see it coming. It's like, oh, there's all these. You could be conspiring, but yeah, it's possible but highly improbable.
And to steal it, I mean, you could take my laptop and walk away with it, and you'd have all the Bitcoins that are on there. I mean, that's if you could steal it in that way. But stealing it as far as cracking one of the wallets somehow, you'd have to basically brute force attack an extremely long key, which would take like a trillion years with our current technology in order to like break it. It's risky.
We tried, it didn't work.
You mentioned that, somebody's in the wallet that just make one remove from land.
You can encrypt your wallet. You can have a password on it. All wallets come with encryption. So if you just have to go in there, enable encryption, put in your password, then they can have it.
What I mean is
You can-
with the hardware.
Oh. There's backups. So basically, to back up, all you have to back up is one file. There's a wallet.dat file. You can just take that and put someplace. That will give you a snapshot of that time. If you do things with the current, there's other wallets that will let you kind of recover everything because of the way that they create their addresses. But with these wallets, if you were to take that wallet.dat out and then do different, there is potential for you to lose some money in there because of the way Bitcoin works. So I recommend regular backups of your wallet.dat.
Your wallet generates new addresses as you go and has only so many. So if you back it up and then, do 100 transactions, it might generate new wallets to accept the change coming back. It might not be in your backup. But like if I were to lose my phone that has my wallet you saw me use here on my way out, it's okay because I have a backup copy at home that is still going to have all my money.
And if you encrypted his wallet and somebody found it, they couldn't do anything with that, but then you'd have his backup at home. That's what made Bitcoin so brilliant, is that you're not dependent on the network itself, that these codes are so unique that you can have them independent of the network. You can take kind of Bitcoin offline and do it in cold storage, even though the network's waiting for these codes, but you can have them in a lockbox and nobody on the network can ever get them, unless of course they bashed you over the head with a wrench.
Because it's the blockchain that stores your coins. Your coins aren't really in your wallet. Your wallet is just the key. So if I have a copy of the key, I can spend the coins from one address to another. But if I lose that key, I can have 100 copies of it. And they're all exactly the same. So
It's all in
if I spend, if I have 20 coins and I spent 10 of them with this key and then lost that key and I go get the other key still has 10 coins. It's all up there.
As an alternative to that, so like, you can do the backups and whatnot. If you're not exactly tech savvy, you could just do an online wallet. And then as far as security goes, you could have it be just as secure as your bank account, where it's just a password, or you could do something with multi-factor authentication. So like you need the password, you need this phone with this app, and punch in this key that only lasts for 20 seconds. So in the case of online wallets, you really don't have to worry about dropping your own hardware. You have to put trust in the online company that they have, backups as their servers go down or something. But at least you still have means of security as well.
What Andreas is saying is blockchain.info, you can have your Bitcoin on this online type of thing, but because it's deterministic, you can still have a backup of something that they have. It sounds bizarre, but you can do that. So you can, that's why I actually use blockchain.info on my iPod, is that if that all gets corrupted and lost, I still have a backup of it, even though they're online. It gets really interesting what That's why blockchain.info has gotten so
Like
powerful.
our main donation address, which we created a vanity address, which is basically a brute force attack. In order to generate an address, you just basically keep on throwing like hashes, internal hashes, until you get an external address that's something that you like, and you do that. What was it? I think it was in the trillions.
It's a big number to try to find it.
Trillions a second.
No, but that it's high, it's big, it's a huge
Well,
number.
basically, with GPUs, you can do that process so fast, and you can go through all kinds of different combinations, and it just keeps checking to see if the address that it creates is something that you like. And by doing that, we created, we got our name, which is Untitled. And if you think about it, that's a lot of characters in order to randomly come up with that. And how long did it take to get Untitled?
27 days.
27 days of constant, brute force attacking to try to generate that. But that address isn't really online anywhere. But that's where that's send the money to. But it doesn't actually exist online. But if we want to collect the money at some point, we just put that private key in there, and then some way we can have access to all of it.
And that too is in the book. That's from the
Almost out of time here. I guess we can take one more question, final call. Unless something brief wants to know. Go for it, Randy.
Okay, so say you have your wallet, but you forget your phone at home, and someone else's phone to close yours.
If you have an online wallet, you could. Of course, there's probably some risk in your password with someone else's device. Probably shouldn't do that, depending on how much money you have in it. But say I had a Coinbase account. Coinbase is a central service, and it's like a digital bank. They're essentially trusted with the coins that anybody has in their account, and I can access that from anywhere, like a PayPal account. But your Bitcoin wallet, you actually have to possess that key in order to